SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation. SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation.
Surf Excel නම් භාගයයි මාසයකට වඩා රිදි සෝතයි.
Tonight, better than a hospital. Close to 70,000 COVID patients treated at home so far.
Patients' mental satisfaction compared to the hospitalized patient, they are happy.
Who's right? The SLMA calls for a booster for all over 60s, pointing to waning immunity, but the WHO says otherwise.
The evidence right now shows that the vaccines are holding up extremely well to protect you against severe disease, hospitalization, or even death.
Long awaited. Schools reopening on the cards as medical experts draw necessary plans.
Decided to issue a statement requesting everyone involved in school activities, adults, to get vaccinated.
20 years on, the world commemorates the 9/11 attacks as Taliban re-establishes power in Afghanistan. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Saturday, the 11th of September, 2021.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයිෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වලකයි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammik Ekanai. Now, Sri Lanka is well ahead of the World Health Organization's target of immunizing at least 40% of the population by the end of this year, as the country have so far fully immunized over 48% of its people. However, the Sri Lanka Medical Association is calling for a booster dose for people over 60 years of age after 6 months, pointing to what they call waning of the vaccine's effectiveness among the population. However, the World Health Governing Body maintains that all the COVID vaccines are holding up well against the virus.
The World Health Organization's target is to ensure that countries vaccinate at least 10% of its population by the end of this month, at least 40% by the end of this year. These targets were set taking into account the difficulty in procuring vaccines. With 290,615 vaccinations done yesterday alone, as of last evening, 10,406,048 people in the country had been fully immunized. 2,965,242 persons are also awaiting the second dose. These numbers put the island well ahead of the WHO targets. Out of the approximate 21.5 million total population, the island has now fully immunized over 48%. Among those vaccinations conducted is the newly added 20 to 29-year age category. There are vaccination centres set up island-wide dedicated for this particular age group. Meanwhile, mobile vaccinations are also continuing with focus given to the elderly population, especially those with serious health conditions, as well as mobility issues. Some health organizations have expressed opinion on the efficacy of certain COVID vaccines, and this has led to some degree of confusion among the people.
There had been questions related to the efficacy of different vaccines published in different countries, and all these reports are under consideration with the Ministry of Health consultants and the specialists in vaccination, epidemiology, public health. These scientific publications are reviewed by them, and there will be recommendations coming from them if necessary to change any strategies. But at the moment, we are confident that whatever the evidence always leads to maintain the status quo with regard to the vaccination.
Apart from the initial struggles in procuring necessary vaccine doses owing to global shortages, the island's immunization drive is having to tackle misinformation as well. Some members of the public have become vaccine averse owing to fake news circulating especially in social media. When a country is attempting to build herd immunity, having unvaccinated people among main vaccination categories increases risk of virus mutations. This issue has not gone unnoticed by the health authorities.
We have observed that still the number of persons who are coming to get the vaccine, especially among the young age groups, still it seems to be very much less. We believe that there has been certain misbeliefs and other things related to this vaccine, and therefore there is some hesitancy to get this vaccine. All these vaccines are equally safe and equally effective.
Certain countries, especially in the West, are only accepting travellers who are immunized with a particular vaccine. Though the WHO have asked those countries to recognize all the jabs that they have given emergency use approval, changes to their what some have called a discriminatory practice has not been forthcoming. With that being the case, the Ministry of Health has put a system in place where those intending to travel overseas are able to obtain the vaccine stipulated by destination countries. For that, however, would-be travellers must produce evidence of the requirement. Meanwhile, the Sri Lanka Medical Association is continuing its calls for a booster dose for those aged 60 and above who were given both doses of AstraZeneca, Pfizer or Moderna vaccines. They say that the effectiveness of the vaccine against severe disease and death among that category might wane after 6 months and the same or a different vaccine be used as the booster. It comes at a time when US studies have shown that vaccine protection appears to be waning among older populations, especially among those 75 and above. With that being the case, Director of the Department of Immunization, Vaccines and Biologicals of the WHO insists that all the COVID vaccines are holding up well against the virus, as she explained the circumstances under which a booster should be considered.
The first is if you're in a category of people that didn't respond adequately to the first 2 doses that you received. We do have some information that for immunocompromised people, it may be necessary to receive a 3rd dose. The second reason is if over time, the immunity that you received and achieved as a result of being vaccinated starts to wane. And in fact, the evidence right now shows that the vaccines are holding up extremely well to protect you against severe disease, hospitalization, or even death. So we don't see strong evidence leading to a need to provide a 3rd dose for people who have already been vaccinated. The third is if the performance of the vaccines are less or inadequate against some of the variants of concern. And again, the vaccines that we have right now against the variants are holding up extremely well against the severe end of the disease spectrum.
So in reality, as things stand, who are in need of a 3rd dose against COVID?
Right now we do have some evidence that there's a small proportion of people, those people who have serious immunocompromising conditions, that don't seem to respond to the first 2 doses in the way that people who don't have an immunocompromising condition do. What they need is a 3rd dose, but that's really for their primary response. There are some other considerations. We need to know, does giving a 3rd dose actually increase the immune response? And we do see evidence that that's true, and we would expect that to be true. But the other issue is, should those doses be given? The evidence is weak for making that argument. We certainly don't see conclusive evidence that a booster dose among the majority of people who have been vaccinated already is needed. And the third issue is safety. Giving a 3rd dose needs to be monitored for the safety issues, and we would like to see a safety database before we would make any such recommendation, and that evidence is also building, but we're not there yet.
Head of the team monitoring the COVID home treatment program, Dr. Malkanthi Galhena, says that patients obtaining treatment under this system are safe as they are being continuously monitored by doctors to detect whether they have complications. She also says that the program is also having a positive effect on the patient's mental state, as they seem to be happier to be treated at home as opposed to at hospitals.
Following a successful trial in the Kalutara district, the COVID home treatment program went island-wide last month. Conducted by the Ministry of Health, the program focuses on COVID patients who are asymptomatic and those with mild symptoms. So far, thousands of people have availed the service. As of last evening, 68,613 patients in total had been registered under the home program. Out of that number, 53,234 patients have successfully recovered and discharged, while 14,471 patients continue to be monitored under the program.
This is the Health Ministry guided home-based care, which the patient should enter to the system through the MOH only, and after that the patient can contact the doctors through 1390 telephone number, and we provide this care to the patient 24 hours. The patient can contact for any problems to the doctor through this telephone number. While we care the patient at home, we address other family members' issues as well, particularly regarding the infection. So we give the correct guidance for patient not to spread this disease to the family members as well.
In the meantime, Dr. Galhena also observes that there is a profound improvement in mental condition under the home treatment program.
The patient's mental satisfaction compared to the hospitalized patient, we have experienced that they are happy to be with the family members even though they are separated temporarily, because they get the hospitality and the care from the family members. We clearly talk to the patient through the telephone with maintenance of the very good doctor-patient relationship, so that we can get the proper information in order to detect the complications, identify them early, correct them if possible. If we detect the complications, we send them through our ambulances services to the hospital without any delay. So because of that, patients are very safe with this system.
Yesterday, it was confirmed that a vast majority of COVID cases in Sri Lanka is the result of the fast-spreading Delta variant, which global medical experts say has become the dominant variant across the world. Experts also caution that Delta might not be the last variant of concern the world will see as the virus continues to evolve.
What we can do about this is basically to adhere to the health guideline, because whether it is Delta or Alpha or Beta or whatever, all these are behaving differently. If it is allowed to spread, it will spread faster than others. But if you don't allow it to spread, it will never spread. What we can do to prevent the spread is adhering to the health guidelines.
Meanwhile, the total number of COVID-19 recoveries in the country rose to 411,233 during the day, after 1,605 patients were given the all-clear to come out of treatment.
Now, the urgency of reopening of schools safe and soon is being felt more than ever before, with medical experts viewing the online education process to be unsustainable for various reasons. With getting back to conventional education said to be the solution, authorities are now deliberating vaccinating the student population. Among the measures taken, a technical committee appointed to look into the reopening of schools requests all personnel involved in school activities to get vaccinated without fail.
Compelled by the pandemic-induced difficulties, negative effects are seen across many dimensions, with key among them being the future of the country, the student population. With the disruptions experienced by the conventional education system, students have been left with no productive education methods for months, and the novel methods introduced as a substitute seems to have benefited less. With that, talks continue on the possibilities of reopening schools and its functions while keeping in mind the ever-changing pandemic situation. A technical committee has met today to deliberate the matter, and the decisions taken during the committee were spelled out by President of the Government Medical Officers Association, Dr. Anuruddha Padeniya.
We decided to announce to request all the teachers and all the non-academic staff of the schools, all the personalities related to student transportation and who are in the teachers training institutions to get vaccinated if they were left behind. So it was suggested that there are about 20,000 of these personalities who are not yet keen on vaccination. So it was decided to issue a statement requesting everyone involved in school activities, adults, to get vaccinated.
If schools are to reopen safely, many factions say it's crucial to get students vaccinated against COVID-19 to prevent virus-related risks among the population. With that in mind, medical authorities also discussed the need to vaccinate the 12 to 19 age category during a meeting of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19.
At the Presidential Task Force last week, we proposed the importance of vaccinating the children between 12 to 19 years of age, as there had been evidence coming up with regard to vaccination of school children from age 12 to 19. However, it is very important that we take this decision under a technical committee which is chaired by the Director General of Health Services. Therefore, we met today to review the necessary guidelines and practices with regard to the childhood vaccination. Currently, we are developing that guideline, and by next Friday the Director General will be able to issue the guideline with regard to the childhood vaccination. There are 3 categories considered under this: children who have comorbidities or morbidities in this age range, then the children between 15 to 19 and children between 12 to 15. How that is going to be prioritized and what is the basic logistics, how we are going to place and technically to ensure the safety is being discussed.
Big 3.
Now, Sri Lanka should have a better and consistent policy when dealing with the Tamil diaspora maneuverings without just reacting to their moves. This was an expert view expressed during a recent webinar on how Sri Lanka should address the issues arising in Geneva. Also speaking there, former commander of the Sri Lanka Navy, Admiral Thisara Samarasinghe, says that it's high time that the global community end its subjection of Sri Lanka to double standards.
Fundamental human rights of every citizen was ensured. Compare this to rest of the world, where people said we destroyed terrorism, destroyed the regimes, and what are those countries today? Now we are trying to come out of this ashes of destructions of our own community in the north and east. Reconciliation is already there to keep the harmony and build. Now we have no IDPs in our country. There are no landmines buried in our country. There are no displaced people. Most of the land has been given back. And we are now trying to harmonize the issues that we have and move forward. In 2014, now 13, when one of the head of states of a leading country was in the opposition, came to Sri Lanka, and was allowed to move in north and east and speak to the people after the conflict. And he had all the freedom. Today he's a head of a state. He came back and wrote in a leading paper of his country, had Afghanistan and Iraq attained post-conflict development, achievement and harmony and human rights establishment, the rest of the world would be going behind Afghanistan and Iraq with Nobel Peace Prize, quote unquote. That is people who saw it. These countries who are tolerating this absolutely unfair nonsense must use their might to investigate these government and non-governmental organizations, use their intelligence, how they are funded, what are they doing, and find out and be truthful in their deliberations and accusations. So do not legitimize terrorism by going behind places when the countries are settling down. I mean, this is double standards. So that has to stop. And countries don't wait till these kind of things happen to them. Now today, New Zealand, there's a mother here talking about a son who was radicalized and injured 6 people. So these things are possible.
In the meantime, President's Counsel Prasanthilal de Alvis wants the government to be proactive in taking the positive gains made by Sri Lanka to the international community, which he believes will depict Sri Lanka in its true colours.
In Ontario, recently they passed in the State Assembly declaring an Education Week on genocide. So Tamil diaspora is day by day, very planned way, strategizing, and we are reactive. We don't have a consistent policy in doing it. Not only even a government, change of minister, the foreign policy and the whole strategy changes. We can't have a policy. Good old days, we had something called a non-aligned policy. We Eastern people believe in the Eastern philosophy. In Sri Lanka, it is a Buddhist philosophy, the majority. We have a Hindu philosophy, both based on that. All these philosophies are based on not attach, non-conflict. That's a basis. We Asian culture is not right-based. We are peace-based. It is like not rights are individualistic. We are social-oriented. They are self-centered. We are altruistic. They are exclusive rights. We are inclusive. So it's a complete different process. Therefore, we must have a consistent policy. Now, they say genocide. Now we are duty-based. Have Sri Lankan army committed genocide? Are the evidence there of that caliber? We know Jaffna is a caste-based. They don't donate blood. Sri Lanka army had given blood to the Jaffna hospital to be given to Jaffna people. Has that happened in any part of the world? Is the government raising this issue? There were 100 Buddhist monks went and gave blood to the Jaffna hospital. Are these highlighted? We don't. And look at BOI projects that has gone into Jaffna economy. Have we highlighted? Is it a nation that is doing genocide? We are looking after the Jaffna people. The recent LPL tournament, who won the LPL tournament? Jaffna Stallion, that had, interestingly, 4 Tamil boys. And the Vijayakanth Vyasakanth was a hero of Sri Lanka. Everyone loved him. Is it a nation of genocide?
The Global South should come together in a bid to reverse the setbacks it suffered during the pandemic. This was the message of Sri Lanka's permanent representative to the United Nations, Mohan Peiris, as he addressed the virtual high-level panel discussion of the UN Day for South-South Cooperation 2021 yesterday in New York, adding that there's a great disparity in vaccinations between the rich and low-income countries. Peiris also called on the South to voice against vaccine nationalism.
The pre-existing vulnerabilities of the Global South can no longer be ignored in this phase of recovery and inclusivity. We have experienced trade, technology, supply chain gaps, but none more so than the access to vaccines. While most developed countries have vaccinated 70% of their population, some developing nations and the LDCs have vaccinated only 2 to 5% of their population, whilst having great difficulty getting access to vaccines. It would therefore be prudent to ask how we, as a global community, allowed this level of inequality to persist even with all the advances we made in achieving the 2030 agenda. Sri Lanka, whilst recognizing and appreciating the bilateral and multilateral arrangements in providing vaccines to our citizens, would like to underline the importance of reiterating the voice of the South against vaccine nationalism and join the UN Secretary General's call for making the vaccines a global public good. In this context, it is vital to explore further alliances in order to overcome these challenges. However, it is important to underline that South-South cooperation is not a substitute for official development assistance or a stand-in for the responsibilities of other stakeholders in the allocation of finances and further development. In this vein, the onus of action and accountability must be with individual stakeholders. The principles of South-South cooperation undoubtedly emphasizes this point. Urgent action by respective stakeholders in all its levels in order to reverse the economic, social and health setbacks is, I say, vital.
Sri Lanka's permanent representative to the United Nations, Mohan Peiris, also emphasized on the need to assist smaller countries in their pandemic recovery as well as in other fronts.
It is timely that we together explore further possible collaboration and measures for assisting small countries with pandemic recovery and vaccination programs, encouraging growth of foreign employment opportunities and promoting eco-tourism and in the health sectors. South-South cooperation has taken many forms. Developing countries today face the multiple interlinked financial, climate and development crises. As the development gap between rich and poor countries grows and inequality deepens, never before has South-South cooperation at all levels been more essential in all fields of international and domestic endeavor as developing countries seek individually and collectively to meet current global challenges together with developed countries. South-South cooperation is the responsibility of the South.
State Minister of Money, Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms, Ajit Nimad Cabral, today revealed that he was requested by the President to take over as the Governor of the Central Bank. This comes after incumbent Governor Professor W.D. Lakshman announced his resignation with effect from Tuesday next week. The State Minister expects to tender his letter of resignation as a Member of Parliament on Monday, and he is expected to accept the appointment as the Central Bank Governor the same week. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, today marks 20 years since the United States came under attack of the Al-Qaeda militants, giving rise to the US invasion in Afghanistan. Famously known as the 9/11 attacks, the tragedy is believed to be one of the deadliest attacks the world has ever seen.
On September 11, 2001, 19 militants associated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 airplanes and carried out attacks in the United States. 2 of the planes were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, and a 3rd plane hit the Pentagon just outside Washington, D.C. Almost 3,000 people were killed during the 9/11 attacks, which triggered major U.S. initiatives to combat terrorism and defined the presidency of George W. Bush. In response to the attacks, the American-led international effort to oust the Taliban regime in Afghanistan was launched, named Operation Enduring Freedom. Within 2 months, U.S. forces effectively removed the Taliban from operational power, but the war continued as U.S. and coalition forces attempted to defeat a Taliban insurgency campaign based in neighboring Pakistan. In 2011, almost a decade after 9/11 attacks, mastermind of the attacks Bin Laden was killed by U.S. Navy SEALs raiding his compound in Abbottabad in Pakistan.
The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. The images of 9/11 are seared into our national memory.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.